Kamsi was very smart and loved to learn. He dreamed of going to school in a faraway land called China. Kamsi lived with his parents and younger sister in a cosy mud brick house. Every day he would help his father on their small farm, tending to the yam and cassava crops. In the evenings, he would sit under the big mango tree in their compound, reading books by the light of the kerosene lamp. One day, a visitor came to their village. It was a man in a fancy suit who talked about scholarships to study abroad. Kamsi's eyes lit up with excitement. He worked harder than ever, studying late into the night and helping his family during the day. Months passed, and finally the news came. Kamsi had won a scholarship to study in China. His family was overjoyed. The whole village celebrated, throwing a big party with lots of jollof rice and palm wine. Soon the day came for Kamsi to leave. With tears in his eyes, he hugged his family goodbye. His mother gave him a small charm for good luck, and his father told him to make them proud. Kamsi promised to study hard and return home with knowledge to help their village. The journey to China was long and tiring. Kamsi had never been on an airplane before, and everything was new and scary. But he was brave and excited about his new adventure. When he arrived in China, Kamsi was amazed. The buildings were taller than any he had ever seen. The streets were busy with cars and bicycles, and there were so many people. Everyone looked different from the people in his village, and they spoke a language he couldn't understand. At the university, Kamsi worked hard to learn Chinese. It was difficult at first, but he practiced every day. He made friends with other international students and learned about their cultures too. One sunny afternoon, while studying in the library, Kamsi saw a pretty Chinese girl. Her name was Lin, and she had long black hair and kind eyes. Kamsi's heart beat faster when he saw her smile. He wanted to talk to her, to be her friend, and maybe even more. Gathering all his courage, Kamsi walked up to Lin and said hello in his best Chinese. But to his surprise, Lin looked frightened. She quickly gathered her books and hurried away, leaving Kamsi confused and sad. Later, Kamsi learned from his Chinese friends that many people in China had wrong ideas about Africa. They had seen only bad news on TV and thought all of Africa was poor and dangerous. This made Kamsi sad, but also determined. He decided to show everyone the real Nigeria he knew and loved. In his classes, Kamsi talked about his home. He showed pictures of his village, the beautiful forests, and the busy markets in Lagos. He told stories about Nigerian festivals and shared Nigerian music with his classmates. Slowly, people started to change their minds. Lin, the pretty girl from the library, heard about Kamsi's presentations. She felt bad for how she had acted and wanted to learn more. One day, she came to one of Kamsi's talks. She listened carefully and was surprised by how different Nigeria sounded from what she had imagined. After the talk, Lin apologized to Kamsi. They started talking and soon became friends. Kamsi taught Lin about Nigerian culture, and Lin helped Kamsi improve his Chinese. They spent a lot of time together, studying, exploring the city and trying new foods. As the months passed, Kamsi and Lin grew closer. They laughed together, shared their dreams, and supported each other through hard times. Kamsi's heart would flutter whenever Lin smiled, and Lin found herself thinking about Kamsi even when they were apart. But soon, it was time for Kamsi to return to Nigeria. He had finished his studies and was eager to use his new knowledge to help his village. Saying goodbye to Lin was hard. They promised to stay in touch, but both knew that long-distance relationships were difficult. Back in Nigeria, Kamsi was welcomed as a hero. His family threw a big party, and the whole village came to hear about his adventures in China. Kamsi used his new skills to start a small business, teaching English and Chinese to young people in his community. Though he was happy to be home, Kamsi often thought about Lin. He would look at the photos they had taken together and wonder if she ever thought about him too. Meanwhile, in China, Lin couldn't stop thinking about Kamsi and Nigeria. She started reading more about Africa and realized how wrong she had been before. The more she learned, the more she wanted to see Nigeria for herself. One day, Lin made a big decision. She would go to Nigeria to find Kamsi. She saved money, got a visa and booked a flight. Her family was worried, but Lin was determined. After a long journey, Lin finally arrived in Lagos, Nigeria's biggest city. Everything was new and exciting. The air was warm, the streets were colourful, and the people were friendly. But Lagos was huge, and Lin didn't know where to start looking for Kamsi. She travelled from city to city, asking about Kamsi and learning more about Nigeria. She tasted delicious Nigerian food, danced to Afrobeats music, and made new friends. With each day, she fell more in love with the country. Finally, Lin heard about a young man in a small village who had studied in China and was now teaching English and Chinese. Could it be Kamsi? With hope in her heart, Lin set off for the village. Lin travelled for hours on bumpy roads to reach Kamsi's village. As she arrived, she saw children playing under a big mango tree. An old man sat nearby, telling stories to a group of eager listeners. Lin approached the old man and asked about Kamsi. The man's eyes lit up. "Ah, Kamsi, our village hero. He teaches at the school just down that path," he said, pointing. With butterflies in her stomach, Lin walked to the school. She heard a familiar voice coming from one of the classrooms. Peeking inside, she saw Kamsi teaching a group of children Chinese words. Lin's heart raced. She took a deep breath and knocked on the door. Kamsi looked up and his eyes widened in surprise. "Lin?" he gasped. The children turned to look at the visitor, whispering excitedly. Kamsi asked them to take a short break and stepped outside to talk to Lin. "What are you doing here?" Kamsi asked, still in shock. Lin smiled nervously. "I came to find you," she said. "I realised how wrong I was about Nigeria, about you. I wanted to see it for myself, and I missed you." Kamsi's face broke into a big smile. He hugged Lin tightly, overjoyed to see her again. Over the next few weeks, Kamsi showed Lin around his village. They visited the farm where he grew up, tried cooking jollof rice together, and danced at a village festival. Lin fell in love with Nigeria's beauty and warmth, just as she had fallen in love with Kamsi. As the days passed, Lin and Kamsi grew closer. They talked about their dreams, their fears, and their hopes for the future. Lin decided to stay in Nigeria, using her skills to help at the local school and learning more about Nigerian culture. One evening, as they sat under the mango tree watching the sunset, Kamsi turned to Lin. "Will you marry me?" he asked softly. Tears of joy filled Lin's eyes. "Yes," she whispered, hugging him tight. Their wedding was a joyous celebration, blending Chinese and Nigerian traditions. The whole village came together to help, cooking feasts and decorating with colourful fabrics. As they started their new life together, Kamsi and Lin worked side by side to improve their community. They expanded the school, started a cultural exchange program, and helped other young people chase their dreams. Years later, Kamsi and Lin would tell their children the story of how they met, a tale of love that crossed oceans, overcame misunderstandings, and brought two cultures together. And every time they told it, they were reminded of the power of open hearts and open minds.